Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. So, today we got the full announcement of Endless Delve and all of the other events that are coming over December. And I thought it's time to brainstorm some build outlines. This is not going to be full path of buildings, this is not going to be a complete guide that you can follow bit by bit. Instead, it's going to be a broad description of archetypes from which you can do your own research. And I'll go through the process of how you do that research with you, but it'll give you a bit of a sense as to some starting points. So, the first thing that needs to be said and understood for Endless Delve is that this is going to be very restrictive when it comes to gearing. You are not going to have access to a lot of things that people take for granted in trade leagues, but even in solo self-found. So for instance, one of the things that players in solo self-found tend to do is get their hands on a lot of resistances really easily through the use of bench crafts. During the campaign, you will be able to pick up a whole bunch of gear that is sort of almost finished, but it needs another resist, like it's got just enough resist that you can use it. What you can do in the normal game is that you can use Helena's crafting bench to add a second resist onto that. Maybe you get something that's got 2 good resists, but is missing life entirely. You can then use Helena's crafting bench to craft life on it. This isn't going to be an option in Endless Delve, and as a result, you're going to have the least access to powerful crafting methods that any Path of Exile event has had. So, that is going to severely constrain your ability to equip gear that's got powerful offensive stats, because ultimately you need to have your basic defensive stats in place. It's also going to mean that more players will run Purity of Elements than normal. Purity of Elements may end up being the lowest opportunity cost way to solve all of your resistance issues, as well as that people will be using things like bismuth flasks. They might be using single element purities to fix up holes in their resistances, all sorts of things like that, and that means that there's less space for offensive options in those slots, so offensive auras or offensive flasks. Secondly, there is a big change since the last Endless Delve event. Actually, there's 2. The first one is that we're going to be able to turn in Divination Cards. Now, this is going to matter mostly for unique items that have Divination Cards that are linked to the Delve mines. So this means that there will be some lucky soul that gets himself a 1 passive Voices in this, because there is a Divination card that drops from all the Crystal King called Luminous Trove that gives you a Voices, and some lucky person is going to undoubtedly turn that in and get a Voices 1. However, this is a void event, so they're going to feel pretty bad about it. That said, that's not going to be for most people. The thing that this is going to matter for most people is going to be the more common Divination cards. Firstly, there's a Divination card for the unique Wand Obliteration. This is a pretty common drop, and so you'll be easily able to self-compile a set. Secondly, there's a Divination card, the Bones, for Vaal Summon Skeletons. So Vaal Summon Skeletons will be very available and probably very popular in this league as a result of that. And thirdly, there will also be a lot less access to 6 links than usual. So Delve does not drop many 6 links compared to more recent league mechanics. Really, from about Synthesis League onward, GGG started making 6 links much easier to obtain than they used to be in the early days of Path of Exile. But Endless Delve will not have access to any of these things. You can get a 6-link unique from one of the chests in Delve, it's just that it's really rare, compared to something like Heist that disgorges enormous amounts of them. So for that reason, one popular strategy in the last Endless Delve event was actually going sideways at a very low monster level, hunting behind fractured walls, looking for a tabula rasa in a unique chest. So that's an option you could consider. But let's talk about changes from last Delve. So there's the Divination cards, and then the second thing that's changing is that there are some new rewards in some of the chests. And some of the most important ones will be that you can now get item level 83 and lower cluster jewels from compact jewelry boxes. These compact jewelry reward boxes come up in jewelry-themed nodes and are uncommon but not truly rare. Getting the exact cluster you want is going to take a while, but you will get it. Most likely you'll be forced to settle for an inferior number of passives. So perhaps your build would love to have a 8 or 9 passive minion cluster, but you might be forced to use a 10 passive one because it's the only one you can get your hands on. But even then, that's a lot better than not having the option to use a minion cluster jewel at all. Other things that have been added in the 316 Delve Overhaul. Item level 83 and down Conqueror influenced items now drop from boxes called Triumphant something. So Triumphant Armaments, Triumphant Jewelry, things like that. Those are rare, but they're not staggeringly rare. You will find these. Additionally, item level 83 and down 20% quality jewelry will drop from superior jewelry boxes. These could be pretty impactful, and they're definitely something you're going to want to make sure your loot filter is showing. You can also vendor these to get catalysts. This is going to be something that's really power gamer only. But if you vendor a collection of jewelry and all of the items in that collection have a combined 40% or higher of the same quality, you will receive a catalyst. This is not a recipe that's usually used in trade leagues at all, because it's just really inefficient. But in Endless Delve, it might actually be the best way to get certain unique items, to get quality on them, or just something that people can do to empower an item once they've already reached a certain point, a level where their character is not easily increased in power. So let's go through a number of potential build archetypes that you could think of for this. Firstly, I want to start with the Saboteur. So the Saboteur, and here we're going to look at the solo self-found Scourge characters that have made it to at least Delve Depth 250. The Saboteur is exceptionally good at this. The only unique that is a massive, massive powerhouse on the item, on the build is Cold Iron Point. Now this is a tremendously strong item and is just a rare drop anywhere unique, but it's not all that rare. It's tier 3 rarity, which means that it's about, I think it's about 3 times as common as a Chevron's Wrappings. And 3 times as rare as a Tabula Rasa. This is not particularly rare, but it's also not particularly common. Lots of people use Atziri's Step in the in solo self-found Scourge, but that's not going to be available here. And that's unfortunate because Atziri's Step is a really good item, but you can do without it. It's not like it's something that's truly essential. It's just a luxury upgrade that you really do like having, but that you certainly don't need. Tigger Skin is another, I think, tier 3 rarity unique that you might come across, but you can live without. And then there's a bunch of other uniques that are powerful that won't exist in this, like Watcher's Eyes, Devouring Diadem. They can't exist because the bosses that they're linked to aren't in the Delve Mines, but you can live without all of those. Fundamentally, the Physical Trap Saboteur archetype is incredibly strong. This archetype uses Seismic Trap to kill bosses and uses Exsanguinate linked to trap support to kill trash mobs. It can also be varied a number of ways. There are versions of this that inflict poison with their traps, and that has some particularly incredible scaling with the unique boots March of the Legion, if you're lucky enough to get those. You can also convert your damage to cold, which is going to be more difficult in this event, but should still be possible to get 100% cold conversion. And so there'll be people experimenting with all of these different things that you can do as a Saboteur. So that's the first archetype I want to outline, the Physical Trapper Saboteur. If you're looking for advice on how to build that, I'm sure that full guides will come out over time, and as they do, I will try to remember to link to them. But what I would suggest you do is just to get some broad sort of passive tree texture, head over to POE.ninja, flick to Solo Self-Found Scourge, so click the build section up the top and then go to Solo Self-Found Scourge, and then highlight Saboteurs and then just look at the passive tree heat map. This gives you a sense as to what solo self-found players generally where they tend to go on the passive tree. Things that are in blue are taken by almost no one. Things that are in light green are taken by a few people, and so you should at least consider them. You can see here a few people have gone for the increased duration cluster down here. Those people are likely the ones using March of the Legion. Or potentially using poison, because that also scales well with that. Pretty much everyone is taking the some of the aura nodes here, and pretty much everyone is taking this sort of fundamental backbone of the tree here. It gets a whole bunch of high quality nodes and also gets you access to some juicy little sections off the side. But then there's a whole lot of flex sections here, and you should feel that as long as your tree that you're planning is reasonably in line with this, then you've got a solid starting point there. So that is the Saboteur option. The second option that I would consider is going a Raider. Now, the reason I'm going to suggest a Raider here is because the Onslaught side grants something like 46% movement speed. Now, 46% move speed is great in ordinary Path of Exile, but in the Delve Mines, 46% move speed also applies to the minecart. And so this means that the minecart will move faster, and that will make the whole delving experience smoother, especially if your goal is to get as high a character level as you can. Delving sideways at monster level 81, 82, 83 is a really good way to do this safely, and a Raider will be fantastic. If your goal is to hit level 95 in this event, then can I suggest that you go a Raider, you delve downwards until you hit monster level 82, and then you just go sideways from there. There's plenty of ways that you can build a Raider. You could go Lightning Strike, you could go Toxic Rain, you could go Caustic Arrow, or you could even be a hipster and use an Elemental Spellcaster build, with Avatar of the Vaal providing you with your damage. So Raiders are all over the place here. That you can see that the heat map, if you just look at it from the perspective of people who are playing a Raider, you see that they're all over the place. Most people take charge nodes near the duelist start, as well as the sort of good stuff clusters near it. Then there's a lot of divergence between what else people do, and that's because it is a diverse ascendancy. But if you filter it to show, say, for instance, only those people playing Vaal Lightning Strike, then things start to settle down a bit more, and you can see that there's a much more established structure that people tend to take with a tree. They'll take this outside rim area, they take all of that, they path into it, usually by bypassing the ranger start area, grabbing the ridiculously good aura nodes above, because aura effect is so strong at the moment, picking up the good life nodes, and then jumping out this way into that section that everyone wants to pick up everything from. So that's something that you can do there if you want to go with Lightning Strike. But Lightning Strike's not the only option. You could go Toxic Rain, which has a very different looking tree. You could also go with Spectral Helix, which has a tree that's more in line with what people are doing if they're playing the Lightning Strike version. One very important warning that I do want to put out for playing a Raider, and this applies not just for the Raider, this is for any build that scales its damage through attacks. You are going to have a much harder time than usual crafting powerful weapons for your character, and you might find yourself using some of the unique weapons in the game that are generally outclassed pretty early on in a trade league. Things like the one-handed sword Scaver, yeah, they do the job, but they're far, far, far behind the power of what some of the more modern deterministic crafting methods allow. You might find yourself using a weapon like that for a lot longer than you're comfortable with, and that will put a limit on your progression. Additionally, for the Raider Ascendancy, one other drawback that needs to be mentioned is that you cannot get the ridiculously powerful unique amulet Leadership's Price. Leadership's Price isn't actually used all that much even in trade leagues by Raiders, but it should be. It's probably the best piece of kit in the game at the moment that is available under 50 exalts. And unfortunately, because it's a heist exclusive drop, you will not be able to get it here. The third ascendancy I wanted to point out is the Champion. Again, this is a really versatile ascendancy, but in this league, Toxic Rain has been the absolute standout. Toxic Rain champions are something that I think will translate well into the Endless Delve event, and it's just a powerful, powerful character that's versatile, and because of the nature of the Champion Ascendancy, the Champion Ascendancy has full power Fortify all the time, which is something that no other Ascendancy can get anymore. The way that the Fortify and Defenses overhaul happened in 3.16, Armor and Evasion were buffed to the moon. Like, they were just buffed. But a couple of the other defensive layers in the game were nerfed, and Fortify was one of them. But Champion has locked in the old school Fortify, the full 20% damage mitigation all the time, and as a result, Champion is one of the most powerful ascendancies defensively. As well as that, it's pretty solid offensively as well. So Toxic Rain Champion is where I'm going to suggest you go here, although you can certainly experiment with plenty of other good choices. So you could go Splitting Steel or Lancing Steel if you want to go that way. You could even go Bone Shatter. There's plenty of other options that people have had some success with. And once more, you can just sort on POE.ninja, have a look at what solo self-found Scourge players have done amongst those players that have reached at least depth 250, and you'll get a sense of what some of the powerful builds in Delve are doing. So the next choice that I want to outline is a build that is much less popular in SSF Scourge, and that is the Berserker. The reason I suggest the Berserker, though, is very similar to the reason I suggest the Raider. Berserker doesn't quite have the Raider's move speed, but it isn't far off. Without rage scaling, it's 30% move speed, and with a bit of rage scaling, you can get that around the 36% mark. However, weapon availability is miles worse in Delve than in the core game, as we were talking about with the Raider and the Champion, so that might limit the performance of the class. Earthshatter is really good, General's Cry is really good, Shield Crush is really good, lots of options that you can use, Rage Vortex is really good. There's a lot of sort of versatility behind the Berserker Ascendancy, And also, if you don't like the Berserker, if you want to play something a bit tankier, you can certainly give the Chieftain a go as well. Chieftain's in a really strange place at the moment where almost no one is playing it, but it is surprisingly good. It's not like Chieftain's been nerfed or anything. It's still in a fine place, and it can do a lot of content in the game. It's just one of the most underrated ascendancies right now. The next thing I was going to suggest would be the Inquisitor. However, the more research that I did into the Inquisitor, the more hesitant I became to recommend any particular Inquisitor build. Now, you could certainly make Righteous Fire work on an Inquisitor, but one of the big problems you're going to face, and this is something I wasn't able to overcome, certainly someone in the comments will probably come up with a very good suggestion that does overcome this problem. The Inquisitor will have a lot of pressures on it from gearing, so it's going to need to get resistances. The Inquisitor Ascendancy only gets a small amount of resistances on its own tree. It's going to need to invest on its gear into resistances. It's also going to need to invest on its gear into mana, into energy shield, into life. There's a lot of these different pressures. You're going to want some armor as well, especially if you're using Divine Shield. You're going to want a bunch of energy shield. And all of these pressures are hard to meet at the same time. Now in a trade league, you can always do this anyway. In solo self-found, there's a number of specific crafts that you can do that can get you around this. But in the context of Endless Delve, where you don't have access to Harvest at all, you're going to find that it'll be more difficult. So additionally, a lot of powerful build-enabling items like Crown of the Inward Eye and Replica Soul Tether will not be available in this. That's going to make things harder as well. That said, I'm absolutely certain that people will prove me wrong and will find a way to make the Inquisitor work. That's just that those people won't be me. Next, there is the question of what to play as the Witch, and I think that there is a clear winner at the moment. The Occultist is a very versatile ascendancy and has a lot of options that you can play. You can go Poisonous Concoction, you can go cold damage over time, you can go chaos damage over time. All of these are viable options. Cold damage over time is going to, there's an outstanding guide to it by the streamer Shack Central, which I highly recommend checking out on the Path of Exile official forums. Link to that down in the description below. If you're interested in playing Bane, that will be undoubtedly something other people will put guides towards, put out guides for at some point. Poisonous Concoction, though, is the new hotness. Now, what do I think in terms of crafting gear for these characters? I think that any build that is playing chaos damage over time is in a really good place for getting early starter gear. The main way that you craft a +2 wand in the game is actually through the use of fossils. Link to a video describing that below. And that is basically using some of the sort of niche interactions of fossils where combinations of fossils can ban a wide swathe of mods. This is really, really useful for an occultist. Really, really useful, and it's something that I think a lot of players will take advantage of, especially if they're planning to play some sort of chaos damage over time build. Unfortunately, this doesn't work for Poisonous Concoction because Poisonous Concoction needs to be used unarmed, but you can play it with Bane, you can play it with Soul Rend if you want to, dig up Soul Rend. That's a skill people haven't seen used for a while, or you can use the classic Essence Drain Contagion. All of these will probably be very popular builds in the Endless Delve event, and for good reason as well. Okay, so that covers the question of the Occultist. For Scion and the Scion Ascendant, the thing that I'm really interested in seeing here is that the lack of access to trigger wands reduces the power of the Scion Necromancer / Gladiator setup. The Necromancer Gladiator setup is great in that it allows you to get a lot of block on your character. You use an offering to provide an offering, which the Scion Necromancer causes to affect you at 50% efficiency. You use that to get a huge chunk of spell block and attack block on your character, and you make sure that you're always consuming corpses by having Desecrate linked to the same trigger as your offering skill is. So that's the package that you can use for defense on a Scion. It's really, really strong, but the problem is that you're not going to have a trigger wand. But there is a solution. You can use Cyclone Link to cast while channeling, Desecrate and Bone Offering, and get exactly the same benefit. And for that reason, I think we might see a number of people playing a Scion Ascendant and using this as a way to make their character super tanky, and then they can play pretty much whatever package they want. This is probably best, though, on physical damage over time spell builds. So builds that use Exsanguinate, Corrupting Fever, and or Reap, they'll be very well placed to use this package in order to get themselves quite a lot of defensive power. Additionally, just returning to the question of the Occultist, one thing that's really significant in Delve is that in the Delve mines, you face a lot less monsters that have curse effect reduction on them than you would in normal play. And this means that the Occultist's ability to enhance curses is incredibly strong. And so that's something that I think a lot of people might want to mess around with. So that's my initial thoughts. I'm sure that people will have their own other ideas as well, and we can discuss that in the comment section down below. May your Vaal Orbs have interesting results, and I will see you around. If there's one of these characters you'd like to see fleshed out a bit more, definitely let me know as well, and if there's enough demand for a specific one, I might put out a full build guide for one of them. Otherwise, have fun, and I will see you in Endless Delve in just a few days' time.